everybody, it's Becky Pearson with Pivot Point of View. I'm joined with Destri Millsap, and today we have the great honor of talking to Cameron Schoneberg from Schoneberg Performance Bits, and he is a welder turned bit maker. We're going to find out a little bit more about how that all came about, and he's also known to some as the man with the perfect Peter or the 3.5-inch Peter. So we'll get to hear that story hopefully before the podcast rounds out, but welcome, Cameron. We are so happy to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This is my first one. I hope not to fuck it up too bad. So
nope, you will be just fine. There's no way that you could screw this up. So
all right,
let's go ahead and just dive into your background. Like you're in Kansas. You're married to a wonderful wife, Emily. She's a barrel racer. Like, what's your background in horses? And yeah, how did you get to be a welder turned bit maker?
well, I've always kind of been a part-time welder. It's only periodically been my full-time job, but I was born and raised in Sutton, Nebraska. They're probably going to disown me after this podcast, but and my family, we've always been involved in horses from since I could walk. And we put on horse sales for, I think, 26 years. We sold horses all over the world, a lot of them up in Canada to the PMU barns, down to South America. We've done everything from training to we used to contract movies or horses for movies. My older brother Jade and I, we worked on a few movies doing the horse stuff. Horses have always been a huge part of my life.
Yeah. So what kind of background? I mean, just good using horses, just general horses, or were they more discipline specific that you?
No, kind of the opposite. Growing up, we always had to make our own horses. So if we wanted to rope, we had to make our own rope horses. More or less, we had to learn how to do whatever we were interested in doing. So just good using horses. And my dad kind of moved his operation to somehow he always had the foresight to see what was coming next. And so we kind of moved our breeding programs. Growing up, we always had studs. At one point, I believe we had 3 or 4 studs. That one year, I think I was in high school, we bred 300 mares. So,
wow.
I mean, it's just my dad kind of was extremely intelligent on what was going to be the hot thing next, whether it be paint horses, whether it be reiners, cutters, no matter what it may be. And we always bought the best mares and the best stud that we could afford at the time and tried to breed good horses. We fed a lot of colts. I'm going to say probably right after I graduated high school, we kind of figured out that it was a whole lot easier to raise and, fit yearlings coming 2-year-olds and, sell the dream. And that was a lot more profitable than, growing up when I was in my early teens. There was times where we'd run a horse through the ring and we'd ride him through the ring. And that may have been their 3rd, 4th, or 5th ride. So, I learned a lot about horsemanship that way, because in order to get those horses trust, in order to put them through that, they've got to be pretty comfortable and trusting in you. So that's kind of why I kind of always focused on horsemanship, is just because from a very young age, I understood the importance of it. So,
yeah. Well, definitely starting your own will, and making your own will definitely make you be a better horseman if you don't want to get bucked
absolutely
off.
And growing up, we'd go to events or whatnot, and some of the people there had trainers that warm the horses up, and the kids our age would just get on them. And at the time, it kind of sucked, to be honest, because we'd get our asses handed to us. But as we progressed, we could hold our own with them. And I mean, I thank God every day because I hit the parent lottery. They made us earn and, do our own thing and make what we got. So rather than just buying us a finished product, and, it was frustrating at the time, growing up, but I'm sure thankful for it now.
Yeah. I remember when Emma was little and that's the great thing about horses and horsemanship and like nobody can do it for you.
Sure.
Yes, they can get on, they can tune that horse, they can get it as good as can be, but when it's you and that horse in the arena, like you nobody can sub in for you, and so
Oh
I
no.
remember when she was a little girl and I was trying to explain something to her and I'm like, Emma, you got to do this or that, and I would get on the back of the horse with her and I would put my hands over her hands and my legs over her legs because she just wasn't quite getting it, and I'm like, this is what I mean when I say, use this inside leg or whatever. But then I got off and I'm like, I can't do it for you. You've got to somehow figure this out. And um that I think the horse is just such a great equalizer. And there's just no substitute for you having to figure it out. The horse doesn't care how much money you got, what your resume is. They just care how you treat them. And I
Oh,
think
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, no, and they are a great equalizer. Just, to compound or expound upon that, they just don't care. And I'm primarily in barrel racing for our bits and everything. And you look back 20 years ago, if you had the funds, you could be in the 1D, you could be winning if you could buy a nice enough horse. That's not the case at all anymore. Everybody that's in the 1D deserves to be in the 1D. You cannot put an average rider on one of these legit 1D horses. They just can't ride the horse. And
mhm.
I mean, that just gives all the, they deserve a lot of credit. I don't think a lot of people understand that. They think they can just go out and buy a new horse and go to winning on it. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the part that I liked about riding colts, and we still have, I mean, we got 3 under 3 at our house right now, and bringing one from the ground up is one of the biggest pride things I think from my standpoint of like you've been that whole horse's life, and then to watch them go on and either succeed with somebody else if they're not for your program, or um, you know have success in the arena yourself with them is just such a great feeling. But building that bond with them to me is so important, and getting to do that from a young age I think is just so cool.
Oh, absolutely. And you're fortunate enough to where you can see them all the way through the program. Growing up, we were always I grew up, horses were income. And so we would get them so far. I can honestly say, even my rope horses that I made growing up, they were finished for me. I could go and I could win on them. But as far as, what a legit finished rope horse was, I never got to see one all the way through the program. So I'm a little bit jealous, for the program that you've got going on. Uh, we always had the dollar in mind. So the faster we could get those horses through the program without skipping steps, the better off we were, because that meant more money in our pocket. So I am a little jealous on that.
Absolutely. And after a while they have a certain feel and certain things that you want all of them to have, as you with your riding style and everything else. And like, you want them to perform a certain way and have your own little trademark of like, this is what my horse brings. It if you get on my horse, it's going to be able to do these things, and you're going to, like, it's going to be great in the box, it's going to score good, it's going to have a good move in the corner, it's going to face hard, and just all of those things. And have people come to expect that from the horses that you ride. I mean, we should sell more of them. It's like it's
Sure.
really hard being in the horse business with your wife when she gets attached to some of them, but
Oh boy, you're
but
preaching to the choir on that. So.
but no, the ones that, yeah, we've been fortunate enough. Like when I was younger, growing up, we had our own horse program, and we had a stud and mares and everything else, and we'd ride them. And once I got them good enough, they either went to my horse, or they went to my sister's, or went to somebody else. I mean, so I was always having to have one coming up. But now that we have our own program, I got one I like, and I can keep it, and then have another colt coming up, and then pick the best one and sell it on the way. So
Oh, absolutely. That's the way to do it. To touch base on the wives, um, my wife was very foreign to the concept of selling horses. Like, you just kept a horse, and regardless if it fit your style or anything, she was always, she considered it a failure if she couldn't go win or make it work, not take the winning out of it, but if she couldn't make a good barrel horse out of whatever horse she took it personally. And it took her a lot of years to understand, some horses just don't fit that. And the sooner you can send them down the road, it's better for the horse, because they can find somebody that fits them. And, now my wife, she understands that you've got to ride the horse that you're on and be able to do that, versus, continuing to ride how you is to be a good trainer, you have to be able to specifically tailor your riding to that horse. And that was completely foreign to her. She thought that you just got on and rode every horse the same, and you kept every horse. And I mean, that was a fight for a lot of years. And because I'm like, okay, this is a loss. This is a loss. This is how much money we're losing on this one. But she just grew up keeping the horses. And I mean, it was frustrating on both of our parts, not just mine, but on hers. So, because I wanted to sell everything that wasn't winning. And, but we've been together, I think 14 or 15 years, and we finally got the kinks ironed out.
yeah, and every horse is different, and they all have their own little quirks and everything else like that. I mean, when my wife and I got together, I went from cow ponies to now these horses that run and are bred to run. And that mess. I mean, I had to completely redo how I trained rope horses, because I have these fire breathing dragons. And now I got to, they aren't going to cow naturally, for one, most of them. And, that they're just different. They're just a lot different. I have a lot more speed, a lot more go. And so, my style was very aggressive. And now I'm like, if I ask too much of them, we're going to run by the thing, and it's going to be like bulldogging. So, yeah, it's just, every horse is so different now, depending on the style. But it doesn't mean that if you don't succeed with it, or they don't get to the level that you want to get, because like you said before, when you had them horses, you're selling the dream. I think a lot of us do buy horses based on high expectations for that horse. And sometimes, something might happen, or maybe they just weren't what we thought they were. And that doesn't mean that they can't go on and be successful with somebody else. And that's just as satisfying to me as them succeeding with me.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you went to welding school, or did you learn welding as a trade from somebody else? Like how did you become a welder?
I started welding when I was in 7th grade. It was really the only classes that I liked in school. I got bored easily. And I mean, anybody that's ever met me knows I've got ADD. So it's kind of hard to, and something about welding itself calmed me down. So, I mean, I could just focus on that. And it's super hard for me to be able to focus on anything. So, it's always something that I've enjoyed, and every chance I got in school, I was down in the welding shop. I would test out of my classes, which in Sutton we were able to do that, see if you could pass the aptitude test or whatever for each math class, English, so on and so forth. And so I would test out of those, so I could just get in the shop more. So it's just something that I love to do. I wasn't ever, I'm not great in anything, but I can do a lot of things well enough. And so, but that was one thing that I always knew I could go back to. So whenever I was in a bind for money, I would go back to welding. But Out of high school, I rodeoed for a couple of years. I wasn't very good. I was just good enough to not have to get a regular job. And so that kind of fit my deal. And I mean, I was plagued with injuries. I broke my neck once, my back twice, both my shoulders reconstructed. I've had about a dozen concussions. So,
I assume you were a rough stock rider then.
yeah, I rode broncs for a lot
I
of
was hoping
years.
it wasn't roping or something.
Oh, no, I wasn't that bad of a roper. But no, I rode broncs and all my main injuries come from riding broncs. The first time I broke my neck and I broke my back, and that time I come off of over the front of a horse and I landed on my head and then on my stomach, and the horse come down right in the middle of my back, and then I got up and the horse kicked me in the back of the head, and boom, I mean, I was down. So 8.5 months later, I enter my next rodeo, and I never really had it back the drive, and I was always a little more apprehensive. So I kind of knew I wasn't ever gonna, that was kind of the end of my career, but I was stubborn, and I really didn't want to get a job. I mean, I to this day I can't stand working an 8 to 5 job, and I didn't have anything to fall back on. So I kept pushing through a few more years until I had a horse flip over on me in the chute and broke my back again. So that was, I didn't really choose to be done riding broncs. It kind of ended it for me. So and then after that, let's see. I've always kind of, I went back to riding a lot of colts, had a few odds and ends job, but you know, I've always kind of just been, more or less like a gypsy. It's hard for me to stay in one place for too long, and I'd move around and, you know, just live the carny lifestyle, I guess, so to speak. But matter of fact, one time when we were rodeoing, me and my traveling partner, we got hooked up with a carnival for a couple days because we were broke and we needed money. But that's a whole nother story for another day. But anyway, so let's see. After I was rodeoing, I taught school for a year. Amongst all
When did
this,
you
I
meet
did.
Emily?
Oh,
Sorry.
I met her. I'll tell you a quick story about how I got there because it involves training horses and stuff like that. So
All right.
I was uh I was dating this gal from Oklahoma, and I moved down there, and it was a disaster. I mean, and she knew I hated it down there, and so she knew I was gonna leave, and she said, "Hey, let's just move to Kansas." And this is how I got where I am now. And so I was like, all right, you know, I was just done with it. But if she was willing to move halfway in between, I'm from Nebraska, she's from Oklahoma, and I said, all right, you know, you can pick, since it's your idea, you pick where we live. And we literally opened up a map, and she said, or she saw Cottonwood Falls, sound like a nice place. So we went up and visited, and got a place to live and everything there. And I didn't have a job, and you know, I just started riding colts. I had a couple connections from the Triangle Sales down in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and so I started riding colts, and I got a lot of problem horses. And the more I got a few of those under my belt, and so word kind of traveled. And I didn't even have a place. I lived in town. I'd just go to these people's places, and I was making buku bucks just going to these places, riding the horses that nobody else wanted to deal with. And I loved it. But I was doing that and playing poker at night. And so, I mean, that's how I paid my bills. And then once that gal, moved up there, then she wanted me to get a real job. And again, I hated that idea, but I tried it. And then I ended up getting a job offer to go to Australia to train horses. So I jumped on a plane and I go to Australia. And I'm down there for about 6 months and having the time of my life. It was just working on a stud farm. They had Arabian studs, and I'm talking the day before I got there, they got a new stud in from Qatar, and they gave $5 million for him. This is not like a cheap place at all. That stud, they just built a new barn specifically for him. In his stall was made out of marble. He had a water feature in his stall. It's the coolest place to this day I've been to.
Wow.
So I was down there, and they just didn't, all their studs, they kept, you know how studs are. They're a little crankier than most, and they were petting them and spoiling them and loving on them, and they all kind of turned mean, so they wanted a Western influence. So I just go down there and kind of straighten the studs out. I come back, and I'm getting, get a job, get a job, get a job. Well, in the meantime, I get an offer to go out to Colorado to a kind of like a dude ranch, but not really. They fly in foreigners that pay buku bucks to be treated like ranch hands. It was the greatest job I've ever had because most of them couldn't speak English, and they just wanted to be, all I had to do is teach them how to ride horses. And it was awesome. I was making between $5,000 and $6,000 a week. I was out there. I got $2,500 a week to go out there plus my expenses, and then I got tips. So it worked out perfect. Well, that still wasn't good enough because I was gone and it was regular job. So one of these days, or 1 week when I was out there, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine. And he said, "Hey man, are you moving?" I said, "No." He's like, "Well, your old lady is." And so I come back home, and she cleaned me out, and like shower curtain, toilet paper, everything was gone.
Oh, wow.
So I'm stuck there, and she was test driving boyfriends, and which it turned out well because she's married to this day and has a wonderful family and everything. I wasn't a very good person at the time, so I don't fault her for doing what she did. And she married the guy that she left me for, so good for them. But I had to choose either. I was offered a full-time job out in Colorado at that ranch. Well, I didn't want to do that because then I was going to have to do the ranch hand chores, and I didn't want to do that. I had a cushy job. But I stuck around there and bouncing back and forth, and then I got a job offer from Caterpillar and in Wamego, Kansas, as a welder. Well, it was about a third of the pay, but I went up there and I started doing that anyways, and that's when my wife Emily and I, when we met. And so she was interested in running barrels and everything, and there wasn't very many people in this area that, this sounds bad, but it's not meant in a bad way, but in the area we live in, people use horses as, as a means to as a tool, because this is a ranching area. They don't, a lot of them don't rope, a lot of them don't. Horses are a tool, nothing else. Well, Emily always, she's big into, she wanted to raise horses. She wanted to, breed barrel horses. She's very passionate about barrel racing. And so we just started dating and kind of went off from there. And I got laid off at Caterpillar shortly after, so I needed something else to do. And I actually went back to school and become a medic. It took me about a year to get licensed, and I worked in an ambulance and in an ER for, I don't know, on and off for a couple of years. And then we just kept going.
There you kept going. So being a medic kind of gave you a little bit of excitement, probably.
Oh, absolutely. And I needed that. To this day, I miss it. And I still do it at the barrel racings. I still practice, and I had to help life flight a gal out of the Lazy E about 2 years ago. So I still get to use it's one of the things, it's part of an education that I'll use the rest of my life. The first year we went over to Italy for the barrel race, I had to play doctor on the plane for 5.5 hours going over the ocean. And so, I use it all the time. So I'm very grateful for doing that.
Yeah. Well, cool. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So when did you start messing around then using your welding skills to make some bits?
Oh, I forgot about this part. Along the way, my wife and I, she always wanted to be self-employed. So we found the local liquor store. It was for sale. And so she bought that while I was at Caterpillar and I was working in the ER on the weekends. And so she bought that, and I could see the money that was, you know, that was coming in and everything and all the freedom that she had. And so I got the idea I was going to buy a liquor store then as well. So I bought one up about 40 miles from where we lived. And so I quit Caterpillar and I quit the hospital and I ran that. And so by having that, we both had the plenty of freedom, and we were gone all the time. If it wasn't for roping, it was for barrel racing. And that first year we were gone all but 6 weekends out of the entire year. I mean, we were living the dream. And after a few years, I think the store that I had, I think I was it was 7 or 8 years, and I was burnt out. I mean, that's if you want to lose your faith in humanity, you know, buy a bar or buy a liquor store. And I was just smooth burnt out. And so I had an opportunity to sell it, and I was going to go back to school because my license had lapsed, and I was going to try to get on a trauma team in either Topeka or Wichita. And in the meantime, while we were in the middle of closing on the store, Troy Flayhardy reached out to me, and I'd been begging him for a couple of years. Hey, I will work for free on the weekends if you just teach me how to build bits. And I said, I really want to know. It's something I've always wanted to do. I can weld, and I've always been passionate about horses. And I said, I'll work for you for free. And he's always like, oh, just come down and I'll teach you what you need to know. Well, it never happened. And as soon as I signed a contract on the store that I was at, he reached out and he said, I'm so far behind, I will pay you to come down and work for me for 3 days a week. Well, hell, the store that I was running, it was free and clear, it's paid off. So I sold the store for a good chunk of change. And so I more or less just took a hiatus or a vacation. Emily and I sat down and we talked about it. You know, we've got about a year that we can live off of. And plus she was able to, you know, still have the store that she ran. And so I took that opportunity, and I told Troy, I said, before going down there, I said, now we're going to end up competing. I said, I'm never going to be at your level. I said, but the reason I want to do this is because I want to sell bits. I said, it's not just a hobby. I said, I want to, you know, try to do it. I said, I'll never make it to your level. And he specifically told me, he said, don't ever, he said, you'll never make it as a bit maker. He said, there's more bit makers out there than there are people riding horses. And it wasn't anything malicious towards me when he said that. It was just the fact that everybody and their dog is a bit maker. And so long story short, or long story a little bit shorter, is I went down there, and you know, as I would work for him from 7:30 or from 7 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. Then I would go home, and I was very fortunate that that store was paid off because I didn't have to borrow money, and I could buy whatever equipment I needed up front. So I was able to scale my company. I would go work for him for that long. I'd come home and work for 6 to 8 hours a day on my own bits, trying to get established. And I mean, at the beginning, it took forever because of inexperience and lack of equipment. I just didn't know what I needed. I kind of went off of what Troy was using, and then it got to a point where I needed different stuff than that. So I had to figure out my own path. And I didn't want to copy him. I wanted to do my own thing. And Troy I'd have questions, and he would say, well, go ahead and just use mine. You know, it works. And I'm like, well, that's not really who I am. I said, I appreciate the offer, but I want to be different. You know, I don't want to screw you over, number one. And I want to be different. So, what I did is after I started building them, I wanted to, my whole goal was I wanted to build bits that the best trainers in the world would use. I didn't want to just build bits to build bits. And I never set out to become one of the biggest or one of the best. I just wanted to know that I could build something that the very best in the world would use. And in my mind, one of the greatest horsemen in the world is Andrea Fappani. Are you guys familiar with him?
Yeah, love
Yes,
listening to his podcast. Yeah.
Okay, along for the ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't normally get starstruck, and I'll talk to anybody. I don't care. And I decided I had 3 bits with me. I had a correction because I just learned how to build correction bits, and then I had a couple O-rings. And Emily and we went down to the reining futurity over Thanksgiving. And I was like, I'm going to go up and talk to Andrea about bits. And I got up there to his alleyway, and I couldn't go forward. I mean, my feet were just cemented to the ground, and Emily about had to push me up there. But for some reason, I was starstruck. I mean, this guy, and I mean, I'd followed him all the way from chromed out Mercedes. Are you familiar with that? Everybody else had tried showing this horse, and he didn't fit the pedigree. He actually had impressive on his papers, and which isn't typical of the reining. And Andrea says, I can take that horse and I can win on it. And everybody laughed at him. He was super young. And this tattooed Italian comes up there and just smokes everybody on it. And that's when I knew that this guy is the best. And so I'd followed him since then. And I went up there, I introduced him, and I said, hey, I'm starting to build bits. I said, would you mind taking a look? And he looked at him and he grabbed that correction. And he's like, I'd never put this in my horse's mouth. And I mean, you want to talk about kicking me in the stomach. It just took all the wind out of my sails. And this is my horsemanship idol. And he just more or less told me I got a piece of shit. And he was busy, you know, it's his busiest time of year during the futurity. And then he proceeded, he said, come with me. And he took me back to his tack stall, and he had hundreds of bits hanging up there. And he took almost an hour of his time to go over each individual bit, what he likes, what he doesn't like. And after that, he told me, he said, kind of think about what we visited about. If you want, you can send me a couple bits and I'll try them out and I'll give you feedback on them.
Wow.
I was like, all right. So at the time, I was only 30 days out on my orders, which is good because I'm so far out that at all times. But I bumped Andrea just because he told me my product was shit. I was going to prove to him that I could build something worthwhile. So I built him a couple bits. I built him 2 corrections to his specifications or what he looks for in a bit. He didn't tell me exactly, but he gave me an idea. And I went home, I built him 2 bits and crickets. I didn't hear anything from him. And that would have been, well, it's in November, it's a futurity, and I didn't hear anything, not one word out of him. And we were out in Colorado doing a clinic with Samantha Flannery. And on the way home, my phone went off. And it was Andrea. And it was a text. It said, hey, this is Andrea. Just wanted to let you know I'm using your bit on 2 of the 3 horses I've got going to the futurity this year. He said, I absolutely love them. And that was the year he won 1st, 3rd, and 7th.
Wow.
And, I mean, I was a little skeptical. I didn't know if I had what it was going to take up until that point. And after that, kind of gave me the confidence to really push to see how, kind of how far I could take this.
Well, kudos for you to you for I mean, just having that courage, and to Emily for kind of pushing you to do that,
Yes.
to not be afraid to learn, and having, even though he told you that first correction bit you had was shit, like to not be so full of pride that you couldn't learn from one of the best in the business.
Oh,
And
sure.
that, so do you feel like that really, how long ago was that happened?
I want to say it was probably, I started in 18.
Because you started, while you're looking that up, you started, I mean, I met you when you would set up a booth at the Cornhusker, and got to try your bits out. And then you did start kind of pairing up with some barrel horse trainers. So we'll talk about that.
Going back to what you said about what he said about your bit when you first showed him, I mean, anytime you start doing something new, and so I know, like, even with what we're doing with the performance programs and everything else, the virtual stuff, I mean, the first few people were like, man, this is no good.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
just, like, it guts you, because you really want to help people and take pride in what you do. And those early times of trying to get it all figured out and figure out what people actually need instead of what you think they might need, it's really humbling, and it's a tough deal. But the ones that make it definitely push through and let it make them better and not get in their feelings and stuff. And I think that's just a good lesson for anybody starting something new, or entrepreneurs in general, is just that mentality of, look, if you want to be the best, go see what the best need and they're using. And then when they tell you something that you don't want to hear, listen to it,
Listen.
go do something
Exactly.
better, and don't get in your feelings about it. Like, don't just dive off the deep end. So anyway, I think that's just a
Absolutely.
really cool story and a great point.
Well, and the people that want positive affirmation all the time, they're not really my people. Blunt, I'm a blunt person myself, and I'll take constructive criticism all day. I'll take somebody being an asshole to me, and I'll listen to them over somebody that, is just going to come up and blow smoke up my ass. I mean, I don't agree with it. I don't believe we all get better if everybody's telling us that we're doing good. No matter how good you are, take 5 minutes to celebrate your win. Take 10 minutes, you know, take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to be pissed about your loss, but then look back and see what you could do better and move on. We can always improve. Complacency kills. And so I don't know. I think, and even at the clinics we do now, which we can get into that more, Becky, but even with the clinics we do now, some people do get offended. And I think it's a lot of, the generational stuff. But even some of the older people, and particularly me, I can't speak for the clinicians that we're with, but I'm going to tell you, if you ask, I don't ever offer unsolicited advice, but if you ask me, I'm going to give you my opinion on what will help you. Now, how you take it is completely up to you, but I am trying to help. Things don't affect you. Your reaction to things affect you. So you can either choose to take it positive and learn from it, or negative and, focus on the negativity and let that eat at you. And that's not going to do you any good in the long run.
Exactly.
So, but I did look at that. That was in 2020. So 2 years into it. So
That's amazing. So you said you were with Sam when he texted you. How long have you been going to clinics with Sam?
that might have been probably the second or third clinic. The first one, Becca Fellman, I had met her at the second event we ever set up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And do you know Becca?
Yes, know Becca
She's
very
one of
well.
my favorite people and one of my
She's
very good
awesome.
friends. But
Yes.
the first day we were ever introduced to each other, we fought like cats and dogs, which is natural for Becca and it's natural for me. I mean, it's just, and it was fun. It was fun for both of us. And that day we argued, and at that time she thought that I was, just trying to copy what Troy was, because everybody had known that I was, a student of Troy's. Well, I'm trying to be different, and and at the beginning there were a lot of similarities in our product, but I was trying to figure out how to be different. I never copied what he was doing, but you can see, I mean, from the styles of welding to the materials that I used, I mean, I learned from the best. Why I am going to take, when you work with the best, you don't just want to go 180 degrees from what's working for them. To this day, I still use the same materials as what Troy does. I've still got one of my 3 welders is still the exact same thing as what Troy was using. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, and it was working for him. So, but me and Becca, we argued most of that day, and she even talked me into a bit, which she's gonna find this funny, because I didn't want to sell. It was my very first Billy Allen that I'd ever made, and I didn't trust it. I didn't know why, but I didn't like the looks of it, and I just didn't trust it, but I couldn't pinpoint why, other than it was ugly. But I just wanted to take it as a demo bit to show the function of it.
Mm-hmm.
And you wouldn't take no for an answer. She ended up making me sell her that bit. And for whatever reason, she will not tell this story. So I'm going to out myself to everybody in your audience. And it broke on her while she was using it.
Oh, wow.
And I told her, and she was very nice, and she reached out and she said, this happened, when you fix it. And obviously I did, but she's never told anybody, and she refuses to. And I think it's, she doesn't want any bad publicity, but if it's man-made, it's going to break, or it can and will break at some point. But she didn't ever want to be the negative publicity for me, because we're friends. But I'm like, Becca, that's just part of it. I fixed it for you right away. And that's just, it happens, shit happens. So, but she's like, we were laughing about it probably 2-3 months ago. And she says, to this day, I've never told anybody about it. It's our little secret. And I'm like, why? I said, focus on my customer service, on fixing what I'd fucked up. Obviously it was something that I'd done, but focus on that. Don't just, it happens. So,
yeah, for sure.
But back to your original question, after Becca's, our kind of quarrel that first day, she was hosting a SAM clinic. And so she invited me up there, and we started the clinics with Kristin Weaver Brown. Are you familiar with her?
Yep.
She's a phenomenal horseman. But we started doing our clinics with her, and then Becca got us lined up with Sam. And that's kind of, we started going with Sam we did one in Iowa, then we went to Colorado, and 2 years ago we traveled with her. We did Montana, North Dakota, back to Montana. We did 6 clinics in 7 days and ended up in Kansas on the last clinic. It was a trip from hell, but it was a lot of fun. So
cool. Yeah, because you guys were at our house when we hosted a SAM clinic, and it was great talking to you. The thing that I've always appreciated about it is to be able to try those bits out, when you're there with the clinics. And you've always been great to talk to at events. I know we've discussed different horses, different bits. I've brought other bits from other makers that I've, either liked or didn't like. And you you and I have talked about, you know, different ways that can improve upon that bit or to accomplish, you know, whatever that we need to accomplish. So I do really appreciate that. And that is one thing I wanted to talk a little bit more about, is, you know, the adjustments that we can make to bits, that we don't necessarily always need a new bit. And you and I've talked about this, like sometimes it's a change in your curb strap or the where it's at in the horse's mouth. And so can you talk a little bit more about that? Like if somebody comes to you with a problem with a bit or think that they need a new bit, how do you go about that whole problem solving process with them?
Well, first and foremost, my first goal is to always see if there's something else, you know, whether it's there. I look at everything mechanically, you know, from the angle of, you know, from the angle of that the neck comes out of the shoulder, from the rider, you know, from their style. Even at a clinic, we may be trying to change, you know, some of the bad habits that rider has, but most people are going to revert back to their original style. So I try to fit what matches their style, what matches the horse. You know, it's not just, well, this is a lifter bit, so this is what you need. That's absolutely not true. I mean, I'm 6 foot tall. Excuse me, I'm 6 foot, 145 pounds. My wife's maybe 5'1". You know, I'm built like a greyhound. She's built like a corgi. I mean, we ride completely different. And so a bit that's going to help do something for me isn't necessarily going to do it for my wife. And I mean, so that's where I hate the, you know, the generalizations as far as, well, this is a lifter bit, this is going to do this, this is going to do that. I mean, it's definitely not true. I mean, I can recommend the same bit to 3 different people for 3 different problems and have it all work out, you know, well for them. But there's a lot of different things that go into me recommending a bit, but ultimately I try to make what they have fit for them and work, because this is an expensive hobby. And that's exactly what it is for most people. It's a hobby. And every time you turn around, there's $100 here, $500 there. So if I can change their day and fix their problem with a 7-cent piece of paracord, you know, that's a win for me. Even if I don't sell them a bit, it's a win. I would rather focus on what they actually need rather than making a sale. But we'll touch on the paracord. This right here has been a lifesaver for a lot of people. And it's just regular 550 paracord that you can get in any color off of Amazon. And why it works well is because a reverse gag, you have 2 different style of bits, primarily in barrel racing. You have the traditional style, I'll see if I can't get this right. The traditional style has the shank that runs through the collar of the mouthpiece. So on a traditional style, and everybody can do this at home, but as soon as you lift the shanks, you can feel it move in your fingertips. So the mouthpiece is going to engage immediately. Even with a little bit of a gag, there's still a movement in that mouthpiece. Now, the other type of bit we have in barrel racing is a reverse gag. This is my Casey shank. But a reverse gag, the mouthpiece is added to the shank in front. Whoever named it a reverse gag is a moron, because it sits on the front of it. I don't understand it. But as it sits, and you can hold this isn't a very good angle to do this, but as you can see, I'm holding the mouthpiece in my hand as I am the horse's mouth. As I move the shanks, the mouthpiece itself does not move. So what happens on a reverse gag, it's not just all reverse gags, but reverse gags, the mouthpiece is going to be secondary. So the first engagement is always going to take place is the curb. So if you think about it like this, if you have a chain curb, which is traditional in barrel racing bits, a chain is going to come up and bite them. That's going to be the first, introduction to you cueing them and asking them to do something. Well, a lot of horses will go up and out versus come back to you because that chain will bite them. And so we kind of figured all this out at clinics. The horses that on the reverse gags that we started out trying to just change their curb strap to a paracord, or actually we didn't start out using paracord. We started using baling twine out of the trash at clinics. And that's when we noticed the biggest difference. So anything soft and supple, paracord or not, or smooth leather, anything but that's not aggressive. It engages first. So if you can visualize this, as soon as you're about a quarter of the way up, the curb is going to engage on under that horse's mouth. So as that comes up, that is going to engage and the mouthpiece will come secondary. So you don't want anything aggressive. You don't want anything that's going to pop up and get a horse's, cause them to go away from you versus coming back to you. And to this day, I've been doing that trick for 5 or 6 years. And at every event, at every clinic, there's still people, it's like the light bulb moment. They're like, oh, I don't even know if my bit is a reverse gag or a traditional style. And I'm like, well, go home and, when you're looking for your next bit or looking in your tack room to figure out which bit is going to work best, first and foremost, always put that mouthpiece in your hand and move the shanks. It's going to let you feel what your horse is going to feel, depending on the mouthpiece, depending on the shank style, you'll know what, it'll give you a better idea of how that horse is going to respond.
Well, that I love that you did that demonstration. Like in my mind, I'm already thinking, okay, we've got one mare that when you take a hold of her, her first reaction is this. And we went to a leather curb strap on her, but you think like something like that, would you go to a paracord first before I try a different bit? Or do you think the paracord is less offensive to them, I guess?
It's less offensive, but the paracord we use, it's thinner, so it can get their attention if needed, but it's not harsh or aggressive. On any reverse gag, I would recommend starting with a paracord or smooth leather, anything but chain. And I'm not saying that there's not some horses out there, some riders that don't need chain for that extra bite, but always start with less, and you can always move up, but it's hard to move back down. And I watch 30, 40 videos a week out of people send me to critique their and see if they need a bit change. And to this day, a lot of them, well, what are you using for a curb, and are you running in a reverse gag or a traditional style? And a lot of them, they don't know. They'll grab something off the wall or out of the tack store, and a lot of barrel racing bits come with chain curbs already on them. And again, I'm not saying that there aren't times when that's exactly what's needed, but if your horse is fighting you, always check your equipment. You might not need a new bit. You just might need to adjust part of what you have, swap something simple out. I mean, it's pretty simple for 7 cents, or you can get a whole roll of this, 100 foot of it for $9. That's a pretty cheap remedy for a lot of issues. So
yeah, right now, so I just made a bit change from an Elliott on my horse Big this summer to one of your bits, and we were trying to decide at Pink Buckle what it was, and I'm still not 100% sure which one it is. It wasn't the perfect Peter, but it has a straighter shank than the perfect Peter, and then it has a square twisted mouthpiece with a lifesaver in the middle, and with a paracord on it, and it gives me the lift that I need. It gives me the whoa that I need, because he's a free running thing. I mean, the feel that we have now with that bit is just way better than what I've had at any point
Good.
with him. And we actually got it when we bought another mare from Deanne Gailson. It was one that Sam used to run this mare in, and so we kind of inherited it. And man, it's
Sure.
working like a charm. And I got the paracord, but sometimes, now tell me, my paracord will not always stay tied. I really would love to know how to keep that tied better. I finally duct taped it to where I needed it to stay before.
Well, there's your answer right there. It's whatever works. You know, we get asked all the time, how do you tie your curb? And it's however you can tie a knot. I mean, as long as it doesn't move, if it's coming undone, like what's going on for you, duct tape's duct tape has a million different uses, and that's one of them. There is no right or wrong way. I will say, on a reverse gag, what is important, anybody that grew up in 4-H knows the old 2-finger special that we were taught for the curves.
Yeah.
Well, on your traditional style, that's completely fine. But if you go to use the 4-H 2-finger special on a reverse gag, you're going to be all the way up here. You lose all your leverage and all your lift, all your control. So on a reverse gag, you want to go a little bit snugger and only one finger. So before I forgot, I wanted to include that. The old 4-H rule doesn't work for reverse gags.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I did find myself really tightening up my the paracord on that reverse gag, and
absolutely,
felt it gave me the action and that I needed, the reaction that I needed, or the timing, I guess, that I needed. Yep, good,
for sure. And that's how reverse gags were designed to work. And curb first, mouthpiece second. So one doesn't work without the other. And whereas the traditional style, technically you can get if you're on a broke horse, you really don't even need a curb, because they're going to be responsive to that mouthpiece. Well, if you try to do that on a reverse gag, I just showed you what's going to happen. You're going to be all the way up over their ears and still not have anything. So just a little snugger, and especially with something soft, it's not going to be offensive to them at all, but you dang sure want that curb to engage. So
okay.
What are some of the other basics you would tell people when they're going to choose their bit? I mean, obviously everybody has a bunch of different styles. You have maturity horses, you have open horses that are older, and then you have all these different free runner and settee styles and all that stuff. What are some of the basics of bits that you would tell people when they go to choose their own?
That's my recommendation would be, reach out to somebody that they trust, whether it's me. I don't really care if people buy a bit from me or not. I'm a horrible bit salesman, but if somebody has questions about, hey, what bit do I need? I'll tell them, and I've had people send me, they've got 6 bits, 6 bridles hanging up, and they just got a new horse and they don't know which one's going to fit better. And I'll go over their tack with them, and, I'll watch them ride, and I'm like, well, the third one in, that's probably going to fit you the best. And there really isn't a good, protocol to just, there's not a checklist to go down. It's a case by case situation. I always want the shortest possible shank to get the job done. And so that's shank wise. Mouthpiece wise, I always want a step up from where you're comfortable and where your horse is comfortable. So again, going back to complacency kills, just a regular smooth round, they have their time and a place. But if you keep a horse in that, you know, the horse is going to get complacent and they're going to lean on it. They're going to get it a little bit heavier. And what do we do as a rider? We're not paying attention to what we have in that horse's mouth. And so we're hanging on it. You know, we're not being aware of what our hands are doing all the time. Whereas if you're comfortable here and your mouthpiece is here, you're going to be paying more attention to what your hands are doing and what that horse is doing. And same with them. You know, a square is our best seller. It's not that it's inherently harsh, but a horse respects it more. They don't push into it. They don't, you know, they respect it more. Well, people are a little more apprehensive about using a square mouthpiece. Well, what if I get into them too much? Well, on a reverse gag, it's really hard to get into one too much. But at least you're aware of what your hands are. So you're going to become a better rider because you're more aware of the situation. So the shortest possible shank, shank wise, mouthpiece, if your comfort level's here, you need the mouthpiece right up here. But outside of that, it's just a case by case.
I think those are great points. And that, you know, we all start a horse thinking we want to be, you know, gentle and not have them, you know, get offended, I guess, if we have to get a hold of them. But I agree, like the smoother that mouthpiece is, the more they'll lean and get to, I think, dull on you. And you know, I have found myself progressing young horses to a shanked bit sooner here lately, you know, in the past few years than I ever used to, just because I just have felt like they've leaned on me too much. And I don't want them to. I want them to be responsive to my hands. I want them to get soft. And a lot of times I'll put them in like your short shank, square mouthpiece with a little dog bone in the middle. That's one of our favorite bits. One of our first bits that we kind of progress them to when they get out of the snaffle. And then we got also a little bit longer shank on that bit from you. And it's not a reverse gag, it's just a regular bit. And yeah, those are two of our favorite bits of yours. And so yeah,
that little short shank has really surprised me in the barrel world because it was just my little horse trader bit. Growing up, you know, we went through hundreds and hundreds of horses, but we only had 3 bits that we would use, and I always loved just a little short shank. And so when I started doing that one, you know, I never expected it to sell in the barrel world as just kind of an all around, you know, just go throw this on there and use it. But it, you know, it's one of our more popular bits. So it's surprising. And it's a snappy, it's a real quick little short shank. It's not overly aggressive, but it is a faster bit. And barrel racers do love that bit. So
yeah, we like it for kind of the everyday working. And you know, going back to Destri's question about, you know, like what bit do you recommend? And you'd say you have these people that'll show you the 10 different bridles that they have or whatever. When I had went to a clinic with Lisa Lockhart, you know, she's basically, she says, you know, like one day she'll just take one bit and ride every horse she has in that one bit to see the response of it. And just like it's a science experiment, you know, and
yes.
It's very interesting to see how each horse will respond to it and how much you can get the feel of a bit when you do that. And then, you know, the next day, then you try a different one. And so we've kind of adopted that plan, you know, when we go riding different horses around here, just ride everything in that bit that day and see what you think and what.
And that's great. I mean, horses should ride and everything, you know, whether or not you have a running bit, but I know a lot of people that'll change it up, just
Mhm.
for whatever reason. And I know a lot of trainers that do just what Lisa does,
Mhm.
and it works. And, you don't know how a horse is going to ride until you ride him in that. And you can take all the advice in the world, but ultimately, going back to what you said at the beginning of the podcast, you know, nobody can ride that horse other than the rider. So bits tend to fit hands more so than horses. So it just depends on what's going to fit you best.
Mhm.
I will say one of my favorite quotes of all time. Ashley Schafer, somebody once asked her, if you're riding a horse and this horse is doing this, what bit are you going to use on them to fix that issue? And she said, whatever bit I've got in their mouth at that moment. And that is the most perfect answer, because I have people coming to me all the time. What bit will do this? What bit will do that? And I can help them on that. But being able to train your horse and use what you have to be able to get the result you want, there's nothing more satisfying. I mean, a lot of times swapping the bit is nothing more than a band-aid, because if your horse doesn't have the proper foundation on him, and if you're skipping steps in your training, a new bit may fix that issue for a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month if you're lucky. But I guarantee you that horses and those bad habits are going to rear their head, and it's going to be harder to fix than if you just gone 2 steps back and fixed it right then and there. I've got to tell a funny story on going back on this. So it's my very first event is in Topeka, Kansas. And Emily made me promise that I'd be on my best behavior. And and I had all the best intentions to fulfill my promise. And so I'm sitting there, and I had to work really hard to get 18 bits done for this event. I was early on. And so I'm sitting there, and people are asking me questions, and I've learned a lot. I've learned way more since being, building bits and going to these clinics and events than I ever knew when I first started. So I wasn't that knowledgeable, but I do understand horsemanship, and I can tell when people are doing something wrong. And so I'm sitting there and trying to help people the best I can. And this drunk lady comes stumbling up there, and she's like, well, what about this bit? And we watch a video, and I'm sitting there watching videos, and I'm trying to be nice. And I'm like, well, man, I said, your horse is hollowing out, and this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Well, what about this bit? I'm like, no, I said, you need to go a couple steps back. And she just wouldn't listen. And I'm sitting back there, and I was starting to get a little pissed off, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And finally I said, look, ma'am, I can sell you every bit on these tables, and it's not going to fix your fucking issue. You need to go back and start this horse all the way over. And I mean, Emily looked at me and just shook her head. And that lady looked at me and just stormed off.
Mm.
And Emily's like, well, I guess you're going to have to get a real job. And so I was sitting there, and I felt pretty bad for losing my cool on this gal and everything. And the next day, 2 of her friends come up and thank me for telling their friend that. And they said, we've been trying to tell her that for years. And what you said to her last night stuck. But we couldn't get her to do it. But you being blatantly honest, opened her eyes.
Mhm.
And that was the first time. That was when I started watching videos. Well, then kind of word traveled on that. And so I had more people coming up to me and I was watching videos. And to this day, I'm a little apprehensive about being brutally honest. But again, it goes back to I'm here to help you. And, if I pat you on the back, I always try to find something good. And I learned that from my dad. No matter how bad it is, you can always find something good to tell them. But that's not going to stop me from being brutally honest with you. And because I can't help you if you're not going to listen to me. Well, a lot of times being a little more subtle like that will open up people's ears a little bit better for some reason.
Yeah.
But I just had to include that, my very first booth setup. I thought it was going to be my last.
Well, we get it with the stuff we're doing, I mean, we get people in that, or, they'll come up to us, well, my back hurts and, oh man, I have this and this and this going on, and they're 50 pounds overweight at least, and I used to always take the standpoint of, I didn't want to hurt their feelings. Man, the last few years, I do try to be diplomatic about it. I'll say, well, is this a good weight for you?
Sure.
And at least, then that opens the door for them. Because if they're overweight, they know it, I mean, they know it.
Sure.
And then that opens the door for us to have the talk. Well, you need to lose weight to help your back pain. I can do whatever in my power when you're here seeing me, and I can give you as many exercises as possible. But if you don't lose this weight, there's nothing that's going to fix your backs. No surgery, nothing, and
Oh,
so
100%.
yeah, you have to find the way to get to the truth.
I mean, here's the deal. The fact that you're somebody who would rather look at all the things instead of just sell them something like that's the fix. I mean, it's just like I talked on the podcast last week with Dr. Goodman, and he's not somebody that's going to go ahead and just cut on somebody for a quick fix or anything else. Like, he's very rehab driven, and hey, let's try to do this, and this, and try to avoid surgery if we can, if that's
Sure.
the best option. And so
Sure.
somebody like you who's like, man, this, maybe you just need to get with your horse. The bit's not the issue when you're making a living selling bits. I just truly respect that, and I hope other people would too.
Well, I appreciate that. And we get a lot of compliments on that. And I know I may not have a customer then, but they'll spread the word, and eventually, it's not gonna. I don't want to be a snake oil salesman. And going back to me not being able to make it as a bit maker, my parents instilled in us, add value to whatever you do. Well, I didn't want to be just another run of the mill bit maker that is selling bits. I wanted to add value, and whether it's working in Colorado with those foreigners, teaching them how to ride, or even that year that I taught, I've always been able to work with people and work with horses and get them together. So that was the value that I figured I could bring into the bit industry, is working with, because at the time there wasn't very many bit makers. Most of them would be like, well, here, buy this bit. If it doesn't work, come back and buy another one. And I mean, that bothers me. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but I personally couldn't be like that. That's just not my style. My dad was a school teacher. My mom's huge into the church. I grew up, putting others before yourself. And I mean, sometimes that boils down to you not making a sale, but doing what's right instead. And so I've always been, pretty constant on that.
I think that's a great point, and just doing what is right for the person instead of just making the sale, for sure.
Well, there's enough people that are trying to sell shit to people every time they turn around, and I'm going to stand out more by being different and by actually helping them than, I mean, shoot, we've been to clinics where I haven't sold a damn bit. We traveled 10, 11 hours and don't sell anything, but I can, go to bed at night knowing that I didn't screw anybody out of $300.
So you used to let people try bits beforehand when you were at events. We talked recently, you don't do that anymore, but if they do buy one of your bits and they don't like it, or for some reason, you do offer a refund, is that right? Or how does that work? Okay.
At the event, if they buy it, let's say at the Pink Buckle, if they buy it and they take it and they try it and they don't like it while we're there,
Okay.
they can exchange it. But in orders, I just don't have our whole operation. We're one of the only ones that I build bits. My wife is building bits with me and our 12-year-old son. I mean, we don't have a big production. It's literally just us. So we don't have the time to, have all those passing in there. But at events and at clinics, we let people try them. And we used to just send them out with people at events and keep their driver's license. And if they brought it back, we'd give and bought it or whatnot, but they get their license back. But then people figured out that, well, I can get a new license for $15 and I can have a $300 bit. So they were doing that. And so I kind of quit doing that. But we've been very fortunate that our bits they maintain their value. So they're easy, they have been pretty easy to sell on the internet. A lot of times you can even make a little bit of money on them, but we had to get away from doing that because I looked in my bit box and I had a stack of driver's license and I was like, man, this isn't a very good business move. I've got to do something a little different. One of the most important things that I've learned in the 7 years or however long I've been doing this is the people that go to the clinics, and well, not even necessarily that, but there are so many people out there that are willing to help anybody that is trying to better themselves. And the clinics that we go to, whether it's Becca, whether it's Sam, whether it's Kristin or Ashley or Joy, any of those people, you're more apt to get help and further your education and get way farther ahead by asking questions. We're all in this together. Part of the reasons that I've had the success that I have is because I can meet people at their level. Well, we've all been, no matter where you're at and your frustrations, we've all been where you are at. So trying to, be ashamed and, false bravado and not asking for help, there's no need for that. I mean, that's the clinics and the clinicians that we work with, and I can't speak for everybody, but the clinicians that we work with, their focuses aren't always on just running barrels, but it's about becoming a better rider, about doing what's right for your horse. And there's so much importance in that, and it boils down, it isn't always just a quick fix, but it boils down, all of our clinicians focus on horsemanship and putting your horse first. And I think if more people focused on that, and I know that there's a lot of clinicians that you'll go and you'll just run around barrels all day. And I mean, there's really good ones out there that will make you a lot better rider. And if you go to the better clinics, you're going to be able to ride more types of horses. You're going to understand your horse, understanding the feel. That's Sam's moniker, that's her logo. And you can spend $600-700 or $500, however much their clinics are, and the knowledge that you'll learn off of going to one of those clinics is priceless. And more people nowadays, there's really no excuse to not be furthering your education, and that'll save you a lot of time and a lot of money, and having to buy a lot of $200-300 bits from people like me by just furthering your own education. And with what Joy, Ashley, and Jolene have, that between the reins, for the cost of feeding some kid in Africa, you could be learning about running barrels. And that's three of the most elite trainers in the world on all their horses. It shows the good, the bad, the ugly, and all that for less than Starbucks every day. In today's world, the only thing holding you back as far as being a better rider is your, unwillingness to open yourself up and to fail. I mean, just go take advantage of everything that's out there. Go to clinics, get a subscription like Between the Reins. I mean, it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. And I mean, even at the clinics, all the ones that I'm at, I'll help anybody. And if I don't have to switch your bit, and even if I do, I'm not going to try to sell you one. To this day, I've never tried to sell a bit. I mean, I've offered bits, but I've never said you need this, because a lot of people don't. Even if whatever they're using isn't working, if they work hard enough, they can get it. They can fix their problems. So,
right. So you are connected. You're connected with Sam Flannery, Ashley Schafer, Joy Wargo, Pete Owen, Kristin Weaver Brown, Becca Fellman. Am I missing some?
Lauren Strough out of Skidmore, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And she's phenomenal. But yeah, that's the most part. And I thank Ashley for kind of where we are. She's probably the biggest reason why we are where we are in the barrel racing world, is because after visiting with Andrea, I was like, well, let's see if lightning can strike in the same place twice. So I reached out. I'd spoken with Ashley a few years before about something completely different, but she didn't know me from Adam. And I said, hey, I'm starting to build bits. Can I send you a couple? And it was kind of the same deal as Andrea's. I didn't hear a word back from her. And next thing I know, my phone started ringing. And my Facebook Messenger, and I was getting all these friend requests. Well, hell, she never asked. She never did anything. She just put 2 of my bits in Barrel Horse News. And I mean, everything just took off. And she's like, I had to read the damn article to figure out that she liked him. I didn't know if she loved him or hated him. And it was because of Ashley that we got in with Pete, and Pete got us in with the Europeans. And with how we got in with Joy was we did a clinic in Iowa with Sam, and then that host was having a Joy clinic and asked if I would come to the Joy clinic. I'm like, no. I said, Joy doesn't know me. I said, I'm not just going to show up at somebody's clinic without them inviting me, the clinician. I said, that's kind of a shitty thing to do. And so then I got to thinking, I got Joy's number from Ashley, and I reached out and I said, Joy, can I send you some bits? I said, I was invited to this clinic and I don't want to go if you don't like my bits. And because there's a lot of people that don't like my bits. And I mean, I actually appreciate those people that don't like them, because if everybody liked them, or if nobody knew a difference in them or could feel a difference in them, my bits wouldn't be unique. They wouldn't be special. So, I mean, I'm one of the few people it doesn't hurt when somebody says they don't like them. But anyways, so I sent Joy a handful of bits, and she goes, yeah, they're good enough. You can come up. And so that's how I got in with Joy.
Man, I bet we could talk about bits to death. I mean, we could probably fill 3 or 4 more episodes with just talking about all the different types and what they do and everything else. But thank you,
well, if
Cameron.
you don't get too much hate mail, then I'll come back on.
Well, I do think we need to have you back on. It's
attention, still attention, right?
Yeah, that's right. Negative publicity is still publicity.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So your lead time right now, are you like 5 months out? Did I see?
No, I'm 3.5 months out right now.
Okay.
We kind of tried moving our standard, the ones that we get a lot of orders for. I've kind of tried, I try to keep Tuskies stocked up on those, just so people don't have to pay the rush price. And Tuskies orders like 1,000 bits a year from us, as many as we can get. And I do 4 deliveries a year to them.
Okay.
And that way, the customized stuff, and when people ask me, if I have to work with them on figuring out what's best, sometimes Tuskies isn't going to have that, but our general ones, kind of the Casey's, the oh, you want to touch on the Peters?
Yeah, I do
So,
want to know about the Peters.
all right. The original Casey, which is just my version of the junior cow. I took what separated what Andrea was looking for was weight and tongue relief. Because he wanted the horses to be able to move their tongue. It is always super important because they can stay calm and they're more confident if they're comfortable. So that's why a lot of our bits are designed around tongue relief. And then the weight, we were the first ones to use the heavier rings. So that's kind of what set us off. But as far as Pete, really, Ashley loved the original Casey, and that was one of the original ones I sent to her, and she loved it. And so when Pete started using our bits, he's like, man, I like this bit, but I don't love it. And he said, I want you to, adjust the purchase. I want a little bit less purchase, and I want a 1/2 inch cut off the shank, the very bottom. And most people would never be able to feel the difference in that. But somebody at Pete's caliber, he knew exactly what he wanted, and he knew the feel he was looking for. And I thought he was full of shit. But so I took the regular Casey shank, in between the rings is 4 inches. Well, he wanted a 1/2 inch off of there, so it's 3.5 inches. And so I couldn't just call it the 3.5 inch Casey because that's not unique. So, well, 3.5 inch Peter, double entendre. So I knew it was going to be catchy. And so I asked Pete, and he said, yeah, you can call it that. But after he got that, he won the first 4 or 5 barrel races. He got it Easter weekend, and he won everything in that thing. So it was he knew exactly the feel that he was wanting. And that just goes to show how well in tuned he is with his own riding and with the horses that he's on, that he could just make little adjustments and get that feel that he knew was going to get him to that next level. But after that, so the 3.5 inch Peter kind of took the world by storm. And I think most people bought it just because of the name. So after that, Pete's like, well, I've got the Casey Long, which is 5 inches, but it's a 50-50 purchase to shank ratio. Well, with Pete's style, the longer, taller purchase doesn't fit his style. So he goes, I want the same purchase ratio as the 3.5 inch, or same amount of purchase as the 3.5 inch Peter, but I want it on the longer shank. And he doesn't run in it, but he'll warm his horses up in it because it's an awful lot of bit. And well, we didn't have a name for it. And I was like, okay, 5 inches, the perfect Peter. You know, that to help us white guys everywhere, that, and that just kind of stuck. So,
okay. I'm really glad you clarified, because I thought maybe the 3.5 inch Peter was the perfect Peter, but you're saying
no, they're two different
Peter.
ones. I don't really think anybody would agree on the 3.5 inch Peter is the perfect Peter. But
Oh no!
Well, I thought it was
the feel you're looking for.
Oh man!
Wow, so many things there, but we won't touch on any of them.
We've got T-shirts that say on the back it says I ride the perfect Peter, and it's got Pete Owens brand on it.
You bet.
And we got a lot of people that'll buy them, but they won't wear them out in public.
Yeah, do you sell merch?
No, we used to try to do that, but getting the same, everybody wants a different size and a different color, and it's kind of hard to do that. And Tuskies has asked us to, get them caps and shirts, so we might try that avenue at some point. But right now, we're just, we work 7 days a week and, focus on the bits. I don't really need another headache.
Well, we sure appreciate you taking time, Cameron, and so very thankful that you have taken this time to share with us. And Yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge and entertaining to boot. So really glad you've been able to do this. And I would imagine that if we get somebody that'll listen to this, that you'll probably be asked to do some more podcasts. So
Well, thank you. So I hope I didn't mess it up too much. This is my very first one. So
not
like I
at
told
all.
you, it's probably going to be my last. So if I'm who I am, which I don't really believe in, sugarcoating anything, or I'm just kind of who I am, love me or hate me. And like Clinton Anderson said, I don't want to be I don't want everybody as my customer. I want the people that are like-minded. So
Yep.
which I know Clinton, and the funny part is he can't stand my bits. So but yeah, so
Yeah.
and it doesn't bother me.
All right. Well, Destry, you want to close her out?
Hey, you bet. Cameron, thank you so much for being on here, and thank you all for listening. And Cameron, thank you very much for making 3.5 to 5 inch beaters great again. And let your health be the pivot point to your success.
Right on. Thank you guys for having me on.